Listen, we've all been there. You're sitting in a meeting, a classroom, maybe a project huddle, and it is just absolute chaos. One person is completely dominating the whole conversation. You've got three people talking over each other, and half the room? Yeah, they've entirely checked out. It's dreadful, right? Well, welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to fix exactly that. We're taking what could easily be a dry academic lesson on communication skills and flipping it into a punchy, highly effective survival guide for mastering group discussions. By the time we're done here, you'll know exactly how to navigate literally any conversation like an absolute pro. Okay, let's dive right into this syllabus. We'll be covering 5 key areas today. First, the discussion ecosystem. Second, the art of turn-taking. Third, amplifying quiet voices. Fourth, navigating inquiries. And finally, number 5, essential do's and don'ts.
So, kicking things off with Section 1, the discussion ecosystem, knowing when to speak, listen, and encourage. You really have to think of group communication as this delicate, living ecosystem. If one really loud voice takes over, the whole system just crashes. So to keep it healthy, we absolutely have to balance our participation.
Moving right along to Section 2, the art of turn-taking, the bedrock of productive meetings. Because honestly, if you want to look like a seasoned pro in literally any setting, it all comes down to mastering the flow of conversation. Let's actually define what we mean here. Turn-taking is simply the process of sharing speaking opportunities fairly during a conversation or discussion. I know, it sounds super basic, but it is incredibly powerful. Instead of one person just hogging the spotlight, every single member gets a fair shot. And why is this so absolutely vital? Well, because good turn-taking completely eliminates those awkward, frustrating interruptions we all hate. Plus, it forces the group to consider different viewpoints, which, you guessed it, improves decision-making. But perhaps most importantly, it builds genuine confidence among everyone in the room. When people actually know they're going to get a fair turn, they stop panicking about when to jump in and start, actually listening. So the crucial point is how we actually pull this off. And it really just breaks down into a super straightforward 3-step chronological playbook. Step 1 happens before you even open your mouth. Listen and wait. Just wait until the current speaker entirely finishes. Do not interrupt. Step 2 happens while you're speaking. Keep it brief, clear, and on topic. Seriously, you do not need a 10-minute monologue. And then step 3, which is the one almost everybody forgets, happens after you speak. Invite another person into the conversation. Just happily hand off the baton.
Now, to do this smoothly, you need the right vocabulary. Take the phrase, "I'd like to build on that point." Honestly, it's like a magic spell. If someone just said something really insightful and you want to jump in, using a collaborative tone like this ensures you don't sound like you're interrupting or hijacking the whole meeting. You're validating them while gracefully taking your turn. It is a total win-win.
Let's look at a perfect example of keeping things brief and clear from our source material. Imagine a discussion about campus cleanliness. Daniel chimes in and says, "Thank you. I think more recycling bins should be placed around campus because they encourage students to separate waste properly." Boom. Done. Do you notice what Daniel did there? He was polite, his point was highly organized, he stayed exactly on the topic of campus cleanliness, and then he got out. That right there is how you keep the discussion ecosystem thriving.
Which brings us to Section 3, amplifying quiet voices, the team's responsibility. Now, what's really interesting about this is that a good discussion isn't just about you shining. It is the responsibility of everyone, especially the leader, to bring out those shy or hesitant members.
So how do we actually do that? Well, by actively creating a safe, welcoming little bubble for people to share. You can do this by asking open-ended questions, the kind that don't just require a simple yes or no. You can explicitly invite quieter members by name. And when they do speak, you absolutely must acknowledge their ideas and give positive feedback. Something like, "Wow, that's a really interesting perspective." And most importantly, avoid criticizing. Seriously, the second someone feels judged, the ecosystem shuts down and you lose their input entirely. Here is exactly what that kind of warm inclusion sounds like in practice. Imagine you're leading the discussion. You notice someone hasn't spoken up yet. You just say, naturally and gently, "Mei Ling, we haven't heard from you yet. Would you like to share your opinion?" See? It is zero pressure, highly polite, and it gives Mei Ling this perfect, wide-open door to step right into the conversation. It makes her feel valued rather than put on the spot.
All right, moving eagerly along to Section 4, navigating inquiries, the mechanics of asking. We really need a solid framework for asking for and clarifying information without, feeling like we're interrogating our colleagues.
First things first, let's define an inquiry. It's simply a question asked to obtain information, clarification, or confirmation. But here is the absolute secret to a genuinely good inquiry. It must always be polite, clear, relevant to the topic at hand, and highly specific. Obviously, we ask these to gather information, sure, but also to understand instructions and ultimately to solve problems together.
Consider phrases like, "So, are you saying that?" or "just to confirm." These are incredibly gentle, brilliant tools to confirm information. Think about it. If someone gives a really confusing explanation, you don't just blurt out, "You aren't making any sense, right?" Instead, you use one of these phrases. It instantly shifts the tone from aggressive or demanding to entirely collaborative. It shows you're actively listening and just want to make sure you're both on the exact same page.
But hey, what happens when someone makes an inquiry directed at you and your mind just goes totally blank? I want to reassure you right now, it is totally 100% okay not to know everything. Panicking or just making up an answer completely destroys your credibility. Instead, use these charming, polite responses to handle tricky questions with total grace. Say, "I'm not entirely sure, but I'll check and get back to you." Or simply, "That's a good question. I don't have that information at the moment." It's honest, it's highly professional, and it keeps the meeting moving forward smoothly. Let's move to Section 5, Essential Do's and Don'ts, the wrap-up, and see how this all builds together. We're going to solidify these fantastic communication habits with a rapid-fire checklist. And this brilliantly illustrates the stark difference between a meeting you desperately want to escape and one where real work actually gets done. On one hand, we've got the toxic habits we are leaving behind. Interrupting unnecessarily, dominating the discussion, giving those awful one-word answers, or ignoring quieter members. No way, not us. Instead, we're adopting the lovely, healthy alternatives, waiting for your turn, actively inviting everyone to participate, asking really clear questions, and giving complete answers. It is literally a night and day difference in how you'll be perceived by your peers. Now, to make this as actionable as possible, I want you to treat these phrases as your ultimate conversational cheat sheet. Mentally bookmark these. If you need to start a discussion, try, "Shall we begin?" "Taking a turn?" "May I share my opinion?" "Need to invite participation?" "What do you think?" "Making an inquiry?" "Could you tell me?" And confirming information? "Just to confirm." Look, having these precise phrases loaded up in your memory will completely eliminate the anxiety of figuring out how to interject. You just plug them into your next collaborative project and watch the magic happen. So here is where we leave things today with an exact practice prompt straight from our source material. How can our Polytechnic become more environmentally friendly? I provocatively challenge you to gather a group of peers, friends, or colleagues today for just 10 minutes, use this exact prompt, and test drive your shiny new turn-taking and inquiry skills. Can you keep the ecosystem balanced? Can you bring the quietest person into the conversation? Give it a try, because once you master this, you'll never, ever dread a group discussion again. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.